The more prepared you are, the less fear you have. As you develop skills and an understanding of how to use the right equipment or resources you have access to, you gain an advantage, especially today when most men are weak and misinformed. You cannot control the world around you, only how you react. Welcome to the How to Prepare for Everything podcast. I'm your host, Rob Benson. Oh, it's all panning out, but this is Steve, and I just wanted to introduce Steve. Steve's got currently over 100 million views, I believe, on YouTube. Is that accurate, Steve?
I think so. I haven't checked. Somewhere around there.
I just looked. It looked like well over 100 million views. You talk about the news, and I get a lot of people that ask me, like, where do you get your news? And I typically tell them Twitter or X. There's specific accounts I follow, but on Instagram, your account came up, and I'm going to tell you, I love that I'm getting insight into what's going on in the world right now that's really this unbiased. I didn't know if you're conservative or if you're liberal or whatever words you want to put in there to identify how somebody thinks. And I think that's what's brilliant about the content that you're currently putting out on YouTube, on Instagram, and probably other social platforms. But give me an idea of what the purpose is to put out this content currently about the news.
Yeah, no, I'd say, and first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you bringing me on the show, thinking of me. It's an honor to be here. And I'm really excited to dive into these topics. But what I'm trying to do is just provide people with information so they know exactly what's going on. I feel like you mentioned, there's so many biases and propaganda and all these opinions. And I have mine, but I try to just, set it aside and be just objective as to what is going on, present the news. I cite all the sources like a book report, present it to people, and just try to provide them with knowledge. They say knowledge is power. So just knowing what's going on, especially in the day and age we live in today, so many people feel like they're left in the dark. So it's me essentially going through the news, assembling it all together, spitting it out into a little report so people know what's going on, and then saying, here it is, and here are the sources. You can take the information and decide, what is the best decisions for you and your family.
It's so good. I mean, you're uncovering, utilizing kind of news sources, contacts that you have, but it really seems like you uncover things prior to where I'm seeing it. If I look at, let's say, if I'm on Twitter, or if I'm on Drudge, or if I'm going to whatever platform, and Drudge has really fallen off for me. I used to really rely on Drudge several years ago, and it seems like it's becoming more of like an Elon hit piece than anything else when I check that. And I'm like, oh, there's a bias here. And anytime I sniff out a little bias at all, I just kind of back up. But one of the things that I talk about is prepared, not one of the things. Everything I talk about is revolving around preparedness. And I want to start off with a question. I've got so many questions, but I want to get in your mind of what's going on right now with one of my biggest concerns. And that is all of the military-aged men that are here in the United States right now, all of the focus that we currently have on these world powers that are starting to grow from what we're seeing in this hatred towards the West, or really, I'm thinking of China, I'm thinking of Russia, I'm thinking of Iran, I'm thinking of North Korea, I'm thinking of the Islamic terrorists that are probably on our shores right now. I believe, and I'm not one to make predictions, but I believe very strongly that there is some type of massive terror attack that's going to be mass coordinated. I believe that they are here, that they're waiting for the moment to strike. Am I way off on that? Or what do we know currently right now if that's actually going to happen?
Yeah, no, great questions. And you're not off at all. These are the warnings that we've been getting for well over the past year or so. And actually, as you mentioned, military age men, I was writing down that note because I didn't have it before, but it was a while back. I did some reports. We did some updates because there was a lot of concerns about the U.S. military draft. And they said that, this has not been implemented for over 50 years now. The last time that we had it, the reserves that we had in our U.S. Armed Forces were 10 times the amount right now. So that is a major concern. So I think there was quite a bit of updates coming out on that, because they're saying that in addition to that, I think it's somewhere between right now, the drafting age, if it were to be implemented, ages 18 to 25, I think it's something like 70%. I can't remember the exact number, don't even qualify because of like health concerns, physical concern, education. There's all of these things, criminal records that make it so the vast majority of the generation right now, which I think is Generation X, wouldn't even be qualified to do so. And we have 1/10 of the current reserves that we had 50 years ago when we last had one. So there's a lot of people saying like, oh, it's this myth, it's not going to happen. Congress is saying there's not going to be a draft. Well, they're saying that because we're not at war, but if we were, we're in a precarious situation as far as that would be, because we have 1/10 of what we had before. Now, in regards to hatred for our nation, it's been pretty wild, in my opinion, the amount of shift that has happened recently. And it could be politics. It depends on your opinion on this, or it could be just a boldness and emboldenedness of our adversaries at this time. But without a doubt, we are seeing a lot of warnings of threats. And I think it was a year ago, almost exactly, we had heard from FBI Director Wray, who had come out and he was, vocalizing this on a regular basis of sleeper cells in the United States. They actually released a list of cities in the United States that were on the FBI watch list because they know that they've come in. And the major concern, again, is the southern border. So we've had these open border policies that have just been allowing people to pour in. And they're saying, there's a lot of people that are seeking asylum and need help, which is understandable. We want to help those that are coming in. However, if we have no means of vetting those that are coming in, they're saying that there are a lot of those that are actually from our adversaries coming in as plants, and they want to do physical and cyber attacks against the United States. So we've had these major warnings coming out from the FBI, and essentially the list is Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. These are the main ones. They're becoming I forget what they call it, the axis of the East or something, the alliance. So it's the East versus the West. And right now there are major concerns because I think typically when people think about people crossing in from the southern border, they think about people coming from Mexico. And they said that is not the case. The vast majority of the people that have been crossing in over the past couple of years, they've said have been coming from China. They've been coming from the Middle East. They're from all over, making their way from around the world up into the southern border. And we have no idea who these people are. In fact, I think it was just a while ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, we had that individual that he was caught at the border, or the news station caught him, he wasn't actually caught, and he said, "You're going to know my name. You're going to see my face again." And he was there for nefarious reasons, they said. So, I don't think that you are far off in that idea that we're potentially going to be looking at threats. Specifically right now at this time, we're on high alert as we're also entering into the transition of power from the Biden administration to Trump.
It is very difficult for, I think, anyone that's listening that's in the US right now to conceptualize this happening. From what you know, and I'm not really asking for necessarily for predictions, but from just uncovering different elements of the news, is this possibly going to become a multi-city attack, or would we be thinking it's going to focus on the bigger, targets like New York, Washington, D.C., or do you think that these sleeper cells are coordinated all throughout the country, even in smaller communities?
Great question. So from what I've gathered, it's a little bit of a combination of both, and it's not obvious, but the list that they released last year at the end of 2023, they gave a variety of different cities and locations to be on the lookout. But New York, without a doubt, Washington, D.C. is at the top of the list. New York, they said there's so many locations and they believe there's so many sleeper cells in the state of New York that they didn't even specify cities. Just the entire state of New York just needs to be on the lookout, all the locations throughout there. But they did give various lists, and a lot of them did include major cities with higher density populations. But the primary focus, I don't think, would be that. A lot of people think, well, they want to wreak havoc on the United States and the people, but not necessarily, because think of it like this. If you're going to, what is it your mom always tells you, or your dad would say, if you're going to get into a fight, throw the first punch and make sure you hit them so hard that they can't hit you back or whatever, if you're going to get into a conflict, hit them good. Well, that's kind of the thinking here, is that if we were to get hit by our adversaries, what benefit is it to destroy a bunch of civilians? they would primarily want to focus on the retaliation that would be the response. So that would mean that they would want to hit likely our nuclear storage facilities, our facilities where we have our nukes, our military bases. They would want to hit these more strategic locations that would cripple our ability to hit them back. So I think that hitting the people with, an attack is something that they might do, but primarily they would want to cripple our ability to respond. So they're saying that military bases, that's why it's a major concern right now. Our military bases, our nuclear storage facilities, our critical infrastructure systems, and the warnings that have been coming out from the FBI specifically against the power grids. There's a huge thing right now with the power grids, with the water, with our imports, all of these things. And right now, the major thing too is they're saying they don't even need to hit us with a bomb, with a nuke. All they really need to do is hit us with an EMP, essentially a blast that would detonate in the air that would fry all like electronic devices, and that alone, just release one EMP that would wipe out power grids. Our civilization would essentially collapse. We are not prepared for this. Our government is not prepared for this. And if that were to happen, I've read the studies on it, and it's very concerning. Is that like we would essentially eat ourselves? We would. I can't remember what the time frame is, but give it about a week or two. I think it's like the first couple of days. Everybody's like, "Oh, what happened? The power's out. Neighbors are trying to help each other out. You're watching out for each other." But then once desperation sets in, once the food is low, the water is low, you're worried about your children, yourself, and they even said you're not going to be concerned about bad people. You're going to be concerned about the good people that are trying to take care of their kids. These are the people you need to be scared of, because when you see individuals start getting desperate for their family, that's when people who you thought were good will start turning. And so it's not even very long. I think it's like a week to 2 weeks. You're going to start seeing people turn. And they said if an EMP were to hit, I've seen some studies say 90% of the population would not survive in a year. If an EMP hit, and it just depends on how fast they're going to be able to get things back on track. But they're saying, don't count on the government, because we're not even prepared right now for what potentially we could be hit with here in the U.S.
Yeah. So thinking of that, we've got supply chain issues, which we saw to a degree during COVID. Like if you own a business and we're trying to get glass jars, which is an example of something that we were dealing with, it's interesting because you don't recognize how many layers to the system to get food on tables there are. So supply chain is a real concern. Cyber attacks are a real concern. Not being able to get your money out of the bank is an actual thing that we've seen a lot of worldwide recently. And then we have like you're mentioning, you've got water treatment facilities, you've got electrical grid that can be attacked. And then stack on top of that, you've got physical harm or violence. But the EMP is the one that comes up in conversation a lot more than it doesn't. An electromagnetic pulse usually is detonated. It can be a local attack, or it can be something that is on a wider scale, which is done via a nuclear explosion that's 200 to 300 miles above the United States, which then, if you're not hardened, and hardened basically means that you have the ability, your infrastructure, your electricity is shielded, or you've got your electronics in Faraday boxes, bags, a room if you've got it. Not many people have that. Thinking about the EMP, and like you were mentioning, that study that was concluded, looking at that, most of the population will die. When you think of drawing a hungry crowd to any situation, there will be violence. It is inevitable. And if the crowd is your community, that fear is even more elevated. So with what's going on, has there been any indication, and I want to tie this into the current issue with New Jersey, and we're seeing it in other places with the drones, is there any connection to any of this? There's so many philosophies, there's so many beliefs on what this could be. Some of them sound really, really valid. And then another one sounds less valid, but then it makes you go, well, could there be? What's the connection there? What's going on with those drones?
Yeah, absolutely. So just yesterday, we had an expert come out on Fox News, and he was also on Forbes Breaking News. He was on a couple of different news media outlets, and he came out and he said that, in his opinion, now, first, let me just say that there's, like you said, there's a couple of different theories. I'd say there's primarily three main ones right now. So the first theory is that this is a foreign adversary that is scoping out our land. They're looking at our U.S. military assets. And also, just to clarify, this is specific to the United States, because this is not only at the mainland of the United States, we're also seeing that our military bases in Europe are being scouted out by these exact same drones. So the primary focus is the United States. So the first individual, he says this could be a foreign adversary. He primarily mentioned China was his thought, but some people have mentioned could be Russia. It could be Iran. Originally, we had a lawmaker come out and say that he believed that there was an Iranian mothership out in the Atlantic that was dispatching these drones, and they were coming from the ocean. So the first theory is there's some sort of foreign adversary that is scoping us out, preparing for potential attacks. Now, the second is that these are actually U.S. drones, and that these U.S. drones are looking for something, and that is for a potential threat that could already be here. And again, like, I'm just kind of doing a brief overview. There's a whole lot to each of these. I know if we want, we can dive deep into one of these, but these are the three theories. So the first one is foreign adversary. Second one, these are U.S. drones that are looking for an attack that is here or is on the way here. And then the third theory is that these are unearthly, that they could be aliens. I've heard some people saying that there are orbs in the sky that are connecting us to some other dimension or something like that, that there are demon portals or something like that. It could be U.S. drones that are trying to detect aliens. So anyways, those are the three, and that the drones are from, yep.
Let me stop you really quick. I want to add a fourth before you keep going. One that I heard
Okay.
that was fairly plausible, that I think is very interesting, in the fact that if Russia recently has done some things to show, hey, we're capable of doing this in a battle scene. And it's plausible that the US is showcasing we can put these drones up in the air. And I want you to correct me if I'm off on this, because you'll know better than I do. But that the United States is able to take these drones up, let them be up in the sky for 8 to 12 hours to show that the range is incredible on these things, that they can land in the ocean, that they can land in places that are unconventional, but they also are large enough to carry a heavy payload to show, hey, we can be anywhere at any moment. So this is our little, like, hey, by the way, Russia, we've got this going for us. And let me caveat all this to say, I am not, and I don't want to get myself into hot water here, but I'm going to say it like I believe it. And that is, I'm American, but I also understand that I disagree with the military industrial complex at its core. If one of my missions in life was to dismantle the military industrial complex and the threat that the US on a corporate greed scale across the entire world is unprecedented. So I don't come at this thinking, oh, we're the good guys, even though I believe there's nowhere greater than the United States of America. I also understand in the same breath that we are a threat to the rest of the world because of corporate greed. And you can, school me on that if you want to, or if you agree. But is that a theory that you've heard, that we're showcasing capabilities?
Actually, no, I have not heard that. The primary three that I've heard were those ones that either it was foreign adversaries, it was us, or that it was, something unearthly that is going around. But us showcasing this, I haven't heard that. I'd like to maybe look and do some more research on that, so that way I could get a little bit more versed in that. But my thought would be, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I think that some of the things that have come out lately that is very fascinating, though, is that, like, the expert that came out yesterday, he said that he feels that regardless of what it is, and again, this is assuming that it's one of the three, not that fourth one that you mentioned, that kind of puts a different spin on things. He said that in his opinion, regardless of where these are coming from, that we are closer to being attacked than ever before. He actually said we are going to get hit. He said he believes that the U.S. is about to experience an attack on our soil, the likes of which we've never seen before. And he said that the leader of the United States, he said, which is currently Joe Biden, he said needs to come out and be real with the American people. He said he thinks that they're not being honest with us. I think we all can probably agree on that. They're claiming that there's no threat. They don't know where they're from, but they're saying, how can you know that they're not a threat if you don't know where they're from. And they're saying that there's no issues here. And this is being said by the Pentagon, the Biden administration, by the military. And then we have Donald Trump, who came out, and he has actually apparently been briefed the same way that they have. And Donald Trump's coming out and saying they're lying to you. The Biden administration, the Pentagon, the military, they're all lying to you. They know exactly what's going on. They're keeping you in the dark. And he said, and I believe this is a huge mistake. They should just tell the American people what's going on. And then he said, there are swarms of these drones in Bedminster, New Jersey. I actually have plans to go to Bedminster, New Jersey. I'm canceling them because I'm not going where the drones are. Now, keep in mind, to me, that speaks volumes, because this is an individual who was literally shot at to be assassinated, got hit in the ear, and he didn't cancel his trip. He still kept on his campaign. But the drones are making him think twice about his trip. And what does he know that he is not at liberty to say at this time that he knows? What is it that he knows about these? So to me, that's a very telltale sign that these drones, to me, it is, in my opinion, from what I'm gathering, something nefarious. And like that expert said yesterday, he said, I believe that this is the precursor to attack. And they're keeping the American people in the dark to stop any potential panic. Now, that fourth thing that you mentioned, I need to look into that more, but I would think that that would be less need for panic. But then if that was the case, that it was just a display or a show, I don't know. Why not share a little bit of information with the American people and cause this internal panic the way that they have? I don't know. Maybe so I'm not really sure on that one.
Well, I think bringing that question up brings the other question up. Why? And that is, why have we allowed this transfer of people over the border illegally? That's the biggest why. So if you're going to go, hey, why is that a thing? It'd be like, why is everything a thing? Like, why even down to like, why do we have the Fed? Like you look at all. So to me, that's less of a thought, because I already distrust that all of the complexes that are built up through corporate greed, through our governmental powers, that I think, and I've said this a lot, I feel like there's more hope today than there was a couple of months ago. And this is coming from an individual that is not necessarily, certainly not during 2016 through 2020, and I don't want to really get into it. I've talked about it a few times, but I'm not a pro-Trump guy. However, I have become a pro-Trump guy in the past couple of months because of he's not implementing the same deep state people that he implemented during his first term. These are people that I wanted RFK to win, but I love the idea of RFK in the position that he's in, because I think he can accomplish more than he could as president for health. And health is a big thing for me. I've talked about that quite a bit, and I believe strongly in it. I love Tulsi Gabbard. I love the idea of holding the government bureaucracy in this way that I think they're going to be doing podcasts where they're going to say, these are the things that we recommend. And even if they don't have the power to accomplish those things through DOGE or the Department of Government Efficiency, even if they don't have the power to do that, they will have the power to dissect what's going on in our government and provide all of us with a, hey, you guys want to see what's happening right now? Because we didn't get to see that before. So if that means that I now become more of a Trump person, I'm here for it, because of the people that are not deep state that he's now, hopefully, and there are some certainly, and I've been pretty vocal about that, of these deep state fools that he wants to put in. If we can eliminate those and really have some clarity, I think we can avoid anarchy. But if that doesn't happen, I think anarchy is inevitable. So all of the things that you're looking at on a daily basis, talking about the news, am I in the right position here to think that? Or is the only way to revamp this entire thing complete chaos?
No, yeah, no. First, I'd say that you're not alone on that. If the as what came out with the election results, that it was like an overwhelming, red wave. And I actually have had I've got friends across the political spectrum, and I live in Texas. It's sort of interesting. So in Texas, it's typically known for being conservative, but I live in Houston, and I live in the heart in Houston, which is actually primarily liberal. So I've got friends across the spectrum here where I live, and I've actually got some people that I've talked to that are never Trumpers, and we've had some conversations and stuff, and they said during the elections they said they were very unhappy with how things were going with, the economy, with our nation's security, with the border crisis, with a lot of different things, and a lot of them feeling like, hey, we were told these things, and then a lot of stuff didn't come to fruition. We felt like we had a lot of unfulfilled promises, and just not really happy with the way things were going. And I told them, I was like, well, if that's the case and you're a never Trumper, well, then who are you going to vote for in the elections? They were like, I really don't know. So I think like you're not alone on that. Is that like there are individuals that have grown to like Trump over the past 4 years. I'd say it's safe to say that there's been that opinion of a lot of people. So you're not alone on that. Now, what is the way forward and how are things going to improve? I don't know. We'll see. And I do think, though, like you said, there's a lot of people that are a little bit more optimistic now, that there is going to be change coming. Trump is saying that he's going to be coming in with a much more aggressive, agenda, a shift in policies. And so we'll see, and I think like kind of like you said, you said you're not really like trusting of our government, of all the stuff that's going on. And I don't think that we should be looking to anybody as like a particular savior. At the end of the day, we got to take care of ourselves. We got to make decisions. I think regardless of who is in the presidency, we're going to have to depend on ourselves. But I think that without a doubt, people are very excited for a change. There is going to be a lot of policy shifts, and we're going to be seeing how things happen here. So, and in regards to like the border, like originally Trump was saying, secure the borders, build the wall. Biden came in and actually took all the border material, sold it like for, pennies on the dollar. And so now they're switching it up, saying now we need to change this.
Hold that
Yeah,
thought
go
for a
ahead.
second. I just saw that. And I love, I forget, gosh, off the top of my head, Government Bids or something is a website where you can go and bid on, local police stations, stuff that they're trying to get rid of, school districts, govdeals.com or .org. It's GovDeals. And I saw the news, and I don't know what website it was. I'm just saying that is a website where you can find really great deals on stuff that your local school district is getting rid of, or police station. Tell us what actually happened. So all of that border wall or the equipment or the materials, they auctioned off. And when was this? That's insane. So taxpayers paid for this stuff. And then what happened?
Yeah. So that's what I've heard. I haven't delved into it too much, so I wouldn't want to give too much specifics because I don't really know. But what I've read and what I've heard is that essentially, Trump said, build a wall. This was his whole thing originally. Like, I remember that was the primary thing that he was leading his campaign on when he won in 2016 was, we need border security. China, China, China. Like there's all these warnings coming out. So that was his big push, his initiative. But then when Biden came in, then we heard like, no, like, why are you doing this? We need to help out people that are coming in that are seeking asylum. We should be opening up and helping those that need help. And so then all of that kind of like stopped and went awry. And from my understanding, I don't know specifically when, but you're right. Like I'm seeing it coming up more now, is that it stopped. It was sitting there. Then they started auctioning it off. And then it's just going for like nothing. All of these materials that were stockpiled there, they're being sold off and gone. So now, I don't know. I've heard Trump talking about now that he's coming back in. Also, he said we need an Iron Dome, just like Israel has. So I think that's another thing is like, hey, we need a wall and we need an Iron Dome for potential attacks. Now, it's just sort of interesting to me because I think like we all see this, and that is the pendulum swing as the political parties shift powers. So it's sort of like, there's all these initiatives and all these things that are being done. And then another power swings in and it kind of undoes those things and then starts its own thing. And it just kind of swings back and forth. So, I actually was listening to somebody this morning. I can't remember who it was. And they were talking about how, Putin, Xi Jinping, a lot of these leaders that are in power for long durations of time, they can think more long term because they're in power. They're going to stay in power, and they're very aggressive with their dictatorship. Whereas here we've got these, 4-8-year swings, and it's really hard to think more long term because an initiative like the border wall can get started, but then can get crushed by the next administration. So, it's really interesting.
Do you know if there's any actions that can be taken for because I've heard there is certainly a push to get across the border. Let's say you're a terrorist and you want to get over here. There's the push to get across the border, which is much more difficult, but there's also legal ways, visas and things. Is there anything that you've heard of how that's happening? If there's any possibility to combat that, to figure out who could possibly be a terrorist? Or is there really, you don't hear, no one's talking that I can see on a mass scale about actual terrorists that they're possibly merging, where before, I'm 44 and I look back over the history of my adult life and thinking about, okay, I know ISIS, and then we hear about Hamas, but they always kind of work separately. Are they coming together to create a stronger force? And how do we figure out who they are? Because we just discussed earlier in this conversation that they're here. There's a lot of them that are here in our borders with plans to die, not to fight and, make it out alive, but to die for their cause. Like, what do we know? What do you know?
Yeah. So for those groups, so I know like a lot of the ones that primarily the FBI had discussed before was from Iran, and they had talked about, we have ISIS, but then also Iran's backed proxy groups right now that are fighting against Israel, and that also they said have made their way over to the United States was, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and, Hamas primarily in, Gaza, Palestinian Strip, or the Gaza Strip. Houthis in Yemen, and Hezbollah is known for being in Lebanon. So these are all various little factions of little groups that are attacking Israel that come from Iran. Now they're saying that some of those groups also have funding and they have been dispatched. So Iran is sort of like the main entity that has the money, which is why when Israel got into conflict directly with Iran, Israel was saying, good, now we can go ahead and address the head of the snake. Because all of these groups, they're receiving their funding from Iran. And in fact, when Hezbollah was being destroyed recently by Israel, we were hearing they were reaching out to Iran saying, we need help, we need something. And Iran was kind of nowhere to be found. And almost the entire chain of command for Hezbollah was wiped out. Well, now they're also dispatching various groups. So there's different ones that are coming over here that we believe are Iranian funded and based. So they come across from our understanding, the southern border. Also, there's ones from China. There's ones that we believe are from Russia. They're from all our adversaries are coming across the southern border. They're finding these locations, these major cities, metropolises, and they're coming in. And from my understanding, the FBI knows they're here, but they're watching them. Now, why would they not just immediately get them and send them out? I think it's because if they're doing this and they're watching them and they know where they are, they're trying to observe, trying to also see who are they connecting with so we can find all of the different ones and what are they plotting and planning. And then when it gets to the point where they're ready to initiate something, then they can, intervene. But right now they're observing, and the list is, it's a long list. I've covered a list in a couple of my videos, but all throughout California, all throughout Florida, they're in Texas, all along the East Coast. And I actually created a map myself from the list to see where they're all at. And it's primarily like where the metropolises are in the East Coast. It's just fully emerged around Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, all over there. There's just tons of them, New York, New Jersey, and they're watching for them. But right now, that's what they're doing is they're watching these groups. They're coming in, and we've actually heard, I can't remember when it was, there was a report that came out that said that they've had issues with the current policies for the border because catch and release, catching individuals, releasing them back. They said that over 100, and I forget what time span it was, were actually on the FBI's terror watch list. But nobody knew at the time. It's just like, oh, we caught them. We got, we recorded that we've had these individuals. We released them back out, and over 100 of them were actually on the terror watch list for the United States. So yeah, we know that they're here, and it's a major concern. So that's why right now, too, one of the big things that Trump is saying he's going to switch up with this administration is the biggest deportation effort in history. He said, if you have come in here illegally and you're seeking asylum, that's great. We want to help you. But we need you to go through the vetting process because we just don't know because there's so many people. So he said, if you're here illegally, get ready. We're going to ship you out, because the threat right now is so massive, that it is, it's wild. It's, I don't think you're off in those thoughts that, potential attack could be coming. So, we've seen the sanctuary cities where people have been coming into Chicago, to all these different locations. And now a lot of people are not happy with what has been unfolding. So a lot of people are saying, hey, we're done with this. The whole thing that we had in, what was it, Springfield, Ohio, a lot of people were saying, hey, like, we don't like what's going on. So I think that that has swayed a lot of people in this direction. So I don't necessarily know if it's so much of a partisan issue anymore. I think a lot of people are concerned seeing like the immigration that's taking place. And I think we all are aware of the fact that, there are families that do need help, but there's a lot of these where they're like, hey, like, we've got an issue and it needs to be addressed. So I hope that like an attack would not be the thing that would cause that. I feel like maybe already everyone's kind of a little bit on the same page with it. I do know, of course, you're going to have people on various ends of the spectrum, but I don't necessarily know that it's that huge of a partisan issue. I might be wrong, though.
Everything right now is happening at such a fast pace where we're getting there's so much going on in the world right now. Any one of these events or things that are transpiring or happening could be monumental on their own. And we have multiples of all of this stuff. You've got the drones, you've got wars. I've been saying for quite some time now, when we started sending money to Ukraine, I said, well, that's it. This is World War III. If we've got specific wars that are going on all over the place, people are like, it's not World War III. You don't know that you're in a world war until months or years after you've been in a world war. If we're sending money as fighting this proxy, and now it's not even proxy, we're sending, much more, maybe still somewhat proxy, but we're involved heavily in these wars. So yeah, it's a World War III right now. But from all of the things that we've already discussed, what have we not mentioned that should be on people's minds to think of? This is a real problem.
Yeah, no, I think that you nailed it. So one of the things that I've heard is that the previous world wars, they didn't even say that it had started at all. Just you're kind of in the middle of it. And then when they go back and write the history books, they say, oh, this is actually when it started. So without a doubt, we could actually be in World War III right now. I've heard a lot of people say this since 2022, since the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. So this could be unfolding before our very eyes. And a lot of people are waiting for some sort of announcement or for some sort of nuclear weapon to detonate. That could probably be the closer to the end of it. So who knows? And without a doubt, it's been escalating. Things have been increasing with the tensions, especially just recently as we are getting closer to the transition of power. So I think that one of the things, without a doubt, as we mentioned, we have the potential threat of local attacks here on U.S. soil. This is huge. We've got the drones and the sleeper cells and potential cyber attacks, but also, as you mentioned, right now with Russia, Russia is the number one nuclear power on Earth. The United States, a close second. I can't remember the nuclear arsenal and how much they have in their triad, but it's somewhere around like 5,500 nuclear warheads, and the United States is a close second. And right now, Russia has been doing a lot of posturing, a lot of flexing of their capabilities. We actually just saw them release an IRBM on Ukraine not too long ago. And this was something that had never been done, never been seen before. This intermediate range ballistic missile that was dropped. And Russia said that nobody has the ability to stop this on Earth. It moves at the speed of Mach 10, so 10 times the speed of sound. No one can stop this. So they said, we don't even need to actually release a nuclear warhead on one of these IRBMs. All we need to do is launch several of these, and we could replicate the damage that could be caused by a nuclear explosion. But of course, the United States had a response to that. And that was that we had literally just, I think the next week later, a missile testing drill that was done out in Guam. And the United States said they're claiming that we have shot down an IRBM. So they're saying Russia is now claiming, flexing to the world that we cannot be stopped. Nobody has the capabilities to stop our missiles. The United States responding and saying, yes, we do. So there is a tit for tat that's going back and forth, and we're seeing this continual escalation. And there's a lot of concerns about where this is going to go. So on one hand, like you said, we're seeing more funding pouring into Ukraine. That is, they're saying escalating the conflict. That's encouraging them. We actually saw this with Tucker Carlson when he had that interview with Putin. And he asked him, he was like, Putin said, why are you Americans sending all of this money and funding to Ukraine when you've got your own issues with your border and your economy and your inflation. He said, if you stop sending funds to Ukraine, the war would be over in 2 weeks, because that's how long Ukraine could last without your funding. So he said, if you would just focus on yourself and not on the war and the conflict over here, this would already be over. You are sustaining the fighting. This was what Putin said. Of course, it's his agenda, so that way there's no more funding coming into Ukraine, so he could essentially put an end to the war by winning it. But he, literally said this, coming out and saying, stop this funding from pouring in. So Russia, though, they're pushing, they're flexing the United States. They're going back and forth. And then there was some massive tension between the United States and Russia when we heard that there was an anonymous source that came out from the White House that said that the Biden administration was taking into consideration providing nuclear warheads to Ukraine to defend themselves against Russia. When that came out, Russia was furious. And the United States, the Biden administration had to walk back those statements, saying that is some random anonymous source. Do not take that as like valid statements. That is totally false. But the week prior to that, we had seen Biden approved the use of long-range ballistic missiles to be used by Ukraine into Russia, to use U.S. long-range missiles. And we had heard Putin say this is a red line. The nation that allows this and the nation that provides the missiles will be considered in direct war with Russia. And then it was exactly the United States on both of those. Then we saw them also approve the use of the anti-personnel landmines to be placed in Ukraine to stop people coming in from Russia. And then with the whole, it was that whole saying the consideration of nukes. And this came with what was the ultimatum that came from Zelensky. He said, listen, we want a NATO alliance. We need some form of safety from Russia for the future. So we either need NATO or we need nukes. But we need one because we need some reassurance that we're going to be safe from Russia. NATO has not opened those doors to Ukraine so far. So then they said, well, Biden, the anonymous source said Biden is saying, well, maybe we should give them nukes. Because also it was Ukraine in, I believe it was, if I remember correctly, 1994 in the Budapest Agreement that's had, Ukraine was the number 3 in the world for nuclear warheads. They gave them up in an act of good faith to say, hey, we'll give up our nuclear weapons, but we want the protection of the United States, Russia, and the UK. We want their reassurance that we will never be attacked by nuclear weapons. In an act of good faith, they gave up all of their nuclear weapons, so they have none. And now they're saying that that has been broken. So the anonymous source was saying that Biden was saying, hey, they're right. They gave this up in an act of good faith, and now they have been, the promise has been broken. So why not give it back? And so right now, like the tensions right now, as we're entering into this potential transition of power, they've been escalating like never before. But now in the last 24 hours, we're hearing that Putin is saying that he is open to some form of ceasefire agreement talks with Trump. And so we'll see, because right now, who knows? Trump is coming in and saying that he's going to end the war. He's going to reach some sort of a deal. Yet at the same time, we also have Russian oligarchs and ministers of defense for Russia coming in and saying, Trump, he's overconfident. It's not going to happen. They are saying that they believe that he's going to meet with Putin and nothing's going to come of it. There's not going to be any sort of an agreement. And they said they believe that this war is going to end with a nuclear detonation on Ukraine, one that will likely last, that this generation will never see life in that area again, because they're going to drop a nuke, and that will be the end of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So it's really hard to say, but I'd say without a doubt, that is one of the primary things right now. The potential attack against our own soil and the conflict that's going on with Russia and Ukraine, which could escalate into NATO and the United States as well. These are the primary things right now that I'd say we should be watching.
You have such an intimate knowledge with presenting this story, to look at what's going on in the world. I, on the other hand, focus all of my efforts on discussing that you need to be prepared, because the likelihood if something comes in a negative way to your life, that no one's coming to help you. And I don't think this is well understood, because it's never been the case for those of us that are our ages, people that have lived since, let's say, they were born in the 60s, 70s, 80s. This is a new phenomenon. There's so many threats. Preparedness is at the forefront of my mind to be ready in case no one comes. Knowing what you do, having this intimate relationship with following all of this on a day-to-day basis, how much are you personally prioritizing your preparedness?
Oh, I am. Let me say this. Prior to uh, getting on YouTube and doing the news, I was not a prepper, didn't know anything about it. Now the news has made me become a prepper. I'd say when you are taking a look at what's going on in the world right now, to me, it would be foolish. I think this to myself, like, I think, okay, like worst case and best case scenario, right? Best case, nothing happens. But worst case scenario, what if this does happen? And I'm sitting here reporting on it and I'm seeing it for myself. I'm not getting this from anybody else. I'm actually seeing this. I'm watching the press briefings. I'm seeing what the Pentagon has to say. I'm watching FBI Director Wray, give this report on what's taking place. And I just think to myself, if I'm not taking the preparations to protect myself and my family, and I'm literally sitting here reporting it, shame on me. So recently I have started making efforts to prepare myself, making sure that I'm getting everything that I need, taking the steps necessary. Because I always say, like, don't be scared, be prepared. When you read a lot of this stuff, it can be upsetting. But I believe that, like I said, knowledge is power, but application of knowledge is the true power. I think the proverb says that the wise man sees calamity is coming and he changes his path. But the simple see the calamity is coming and they stay along the same course and they fall into calamity. So to me, it's like, okay, if we see these things are coming, and they are, really resonating in us that there is some sort of issue that is coming, then we should take it upon ourselves to make sure that we're ready. So without a doubt, we had mentioned like radiation exposure. I know that, like, I've seen you talking about the iodide potassium. We need to make sure that if there's any radiation exposure, that it doesn't attack our thyroid, that it can be absorbed and we can go ahead and get that out through the urine with those pills. You need to have those available. You need to stock up on food and water. Actually, I think was it Sweden, Norway, Finland, a lot of those countries over there, they started handing out pamphlets in just the past like couple months, warning their civilians that there could be nuclear fallout and war right now with the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. So they're telling their citizens to get ready. And actually, in Russia, they're moving around these mobile fallout shelters for nuclear war. They look like shipping containers, and they say they can fit about 52 people per container, and they should keep people safe for 48 hours. So these other nations are saying, hey, get ready. Now those countries, like, I think it was like, I can't remember if it was Sweden or Switzerland, but Norway,
Sweden.
Finland, Sweden, they're telling them, get at least a week's worth of supplies, get your food, get your water, get your baby supplies, get everything that you need. But my thought is this: I live in Houston, and we get hit with hurricanes, and our power goes down. It's out for weeks. Now I can't even imagine if we got hit with like an EMP, how long it would take for us to get back on track. So for me, I don't think a week is enough personally. And I know, like, it depends on your budget and your finances, what you can do. But I feel like you should be working your way up towards at least like 3 months, 6 months. The reports that I've read have been very concerning. They're saying that some places they think could be out for a year or longer. So I personally think stocking up on food, water, supplies, things that you don't think about too, like what about the waste for the bathroom? What about paper maps to get around? If your phone and your GPS is out, do you know the streets of your city, how to get to and fro places? There's a lot of things that can go into it, and I think these are the things that I've been thinking about now, and I'm making sure that I'm getting them ready because, like I said, worst case scenario is that all hell breaks loose, and this is terrible. Best case scenario, nothing happens, and I've just got a stockpile of extra food and water that I can just kind of dip into. So I know for myself, yeah, these are things that I'm preparing for.
Very nice. Thinking about this whole process, it is, and I want to talk about finances and kind of going into that just a little bit. But when you look at what's going on and you realize that there is a threat, being able to develop skills and resources allow you to become more well-rounded as a person, because most people that are alive today live in a digital world. They're in the real world, but the majority of their time, and when the majority of your time is spent somewhere, that's where you develop your skills, where you develop your references, how you communicate. And right now we're living in a digital world, so getting closer back to understanding the natural world, what chemical compounds can do, things that you have never really been taught because you've always learned that there's products. That really great marketing has shown you all these products can do this. You don't need those products. You need multiple options for chemical compounds to store with long term. A lot of them are indefinite shelf life. And having that, knowing how to use it, understanding how freeze dried food retains its nutritional value much longer than anything else, looking at purification for water. Where's that water source going to be? Because water is life. Without it, you've got nothing. But all of that, putting that all together, is really just an investment in yourself. And what I call it is a self-managed insurance plan. And that makes you more prepared for the unexpected. And if nothing happens, you have a stockpile, like you mentioned, of things that you can use. You're not paying it to some company to have it in case of death or you're in an accident. This is an insurance plan that you control, that you buy into, and that will benefit you one way or another, whether that's mentally or physically if that day comes. But thinking about all of that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about an experience that I had. I know you've had the same thing, how you've built yourself up from this, just as really a motivation. But I was in the mortgage industry for early 2000s into when the collapse happened. I lost my home to foreclosure. I was making quite a bit of money in my 20s, more than I should have been making. I had a lot of fun toys. I had boats. I had nice cars. I had a lot of things. I lost everything and went completely broke when that mortgage implosion happened. And I tried several things. It got so bad after I lost everything that I was knocking on doors, selling security systems after making a lot of money. It was very humbling. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. That type of rejection is very difficult, especially when I've got young kids and I just lost everything. I felt like a fool, but it was the greatest experience as far as learning that I've ever had in my life. I learned so much about myself, that I don't control the world, but I control how I prepare and how I'm ready. And that's a testament towards preparedness, like we're talking about with food and just having your own self-managed insurance plan. I know you've got somewhat of a similar story. Kind of tell us a little bit about, what happened in your life and what that taught you.
Yeah, no, yeah. As you're saying that, I feel like you're telling a little bit of my story for sure, because I went through something very similar, and that was, I think I had just gotten out of college. I was just married, and I was not out of college. Excuse me. I was just transferring. No, I was just getting out of college, just married, and then everything started collapsing. And so I get out of college. We have the Great Recession. I can't find a job. The internship that I was working at that I thought was going to hire me on let me go. And just, I couldn't make any money, couldn't get ends meet, and things just fell apart for me. And I didn't have a whole lot back then, but what I did have went away. My car broke down. I didn't have the money to fix it. I couldn't pay for my apartment. So I basically lost everything. And, I had to move in the back bedroom of my parents' house with my wife, and it was like, before, when everything was good, you're like vision casting, like, stick with me, girl. I'm going to show you the world. It's going to be awesome. Switch scenes like 2 years later, and like, it's like, please stick with me, girl, because like the only place that she's seen in the world is the back of my bedroom, parents' bedroom. And so like, but she stuck with me. So thankful I had God and I had my wife through it all, but I lost everything else. And that's really when I felt like I kind of got a connection with God, and I got inspired, and I started like, really making changes in my life to progress forward. But that really resonated with me, that like, hey, I don't ever want to be in this situation again. It's such a low feeling, especially like as a man, to feel like I can't provide. I'm not there for my family. It's this crushing element that I was like, hey, I just don't ever want to go through this again. So it really like propelled me forward. And now like, I got back on my feet. But then after that, I started getting into like, business, entrepreneur, real estate, things like that, investing. And it's just this constant reminder in the back of my head what I went through, that I don't ever want to go back there again. And that was one of the motivations for the channel was, I had my real estate business and I really wanted to start bringing in more potential clients and business for the real estate. But then when the pandemic hit, I just started at the end of 2019, 2020, just started the channel. Pandemic hit, and I just thought I saw all these people unemployed, millions a week coming in, and it just hit me. It just was like, man, that was me, and I know how it feels to just suddenly lose everything. That's kind of when I pivoted into news updates, giving people information. As I was thinking, like, what can I do to help people? And it was like, hey, let me just give them updates. But yeah, like I know what it feels like to just lose everything and to just have your world just flipped upside down. But I just think like, hey, I'm not going to let this define me, but I'm going to let this refine me. I'm going to let this improve who I am and not let it, this is not the end of my story.
Well said. Are you concerned, or do you have any feelings or thoughts on what is currently a possible, and we didn't really talk about this, but take all the threats that are out there, but how do you explain, or how do you, for yourself, prepare for possible economic downturns, or the preparedness that happens with, like, what do you suggest for investments? I know that you're heavily involved with that currently. You're heavily involved with understanding kind of, it's like, see, this is the thing about everyone that invests in the stock market or Bitcoin or real estate. They're preppers. They're preppers for finances. They're putting things away. They're making sacrifices. They're learning, and they're preparing. It's like someone that goes to college. That's expensive. That takes a lot of time. If you're really into it and you want to become a doctor, let's say, that's prepping. If you want to get healthy and have the body that you want, you're a prepper. It's just a different model or mindset. But for finances, that's not something I really ever talk about. I'd like to get your insight on what it's like, or what would you give for advice or direction in relation to financial prepping?
That's a good question. I've never heard it said like that. I like that, financial prepping. I think man, that's like such a big, broad question. I think it really depends on where the individual is at, because, are you somebody that's just starting off, or are you somebody that has got resources already? And I think the strategy changes. I think that's one of the things that like needs to be emphasized, is that if you're somebody that's like, up to your eyeballs in debt and you're trying to, pay down credit cards and things like that, you're going to take a very different approach as to somebody that already has resources or has businesses and things like that. So it kind of depends on where you're at. Now, once you get some traction, like first I'd say you got to identify like, okay, where am I at? Where are my income, my expenses? Let me get a hold of things monthly. One of the big books that really helped me out, that really opened my eyes, because I don't come from any sort of financial background or money or even entrepreneurial. It was all new to me until I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and like that one really helped me out. There's no endorsement or anything here for that. It's just that one really resonated with me, and there's been other ones, but that was the first one that kind of like hit me like, oh hey, there's a better way. Let me just get a hold of things and get rid of my debt and all these things and start getting some traction. And once you get that going on, I actually sought out a millionaire mentor, because I was like, hey, I don't ever want to go back to the situation I was in before. I started seeking out millionaires to try to get information about how do I have success in life. And I got one that finally actually talked to me, and he met with me, and we discussed things. And he said, listen, Steve, he was like, so first off, he was like, you're not lazy, you're not dumb, you're not stupid or whatever. The problem is you have bad information. You need to get the right information. Once you have the right information, then you can apply it. He said, the problem is that you've been given the wrong formula. And he said, the vast majority of people in life, they're told, go to school, get a degree, get a job, work for the state or whatever. And then, you'll have good benefits. And then after like 30, 40 years, you retire, and that's your life. And he's like, well, that's not going to be a way to advance and have like a lot of success. He said, what the rich tell their kids and the wealthy, they tell them that there's 3 vehicles of which they need to focus on. You either need to focus on investing in real estate, investing in stocks. He said, learn one of these, master them, or learn them all. And he was like, and the big one that can change your life is to have a business, grow and maintain and have a successful business, and then even exit the business. He said these are the things that the wealthy focus on. So that's what I started studying after I came across that individual. And so I'd say, like, depending on where you're at, if you want to financially prep, you need to start looking into those avenues. That's what I tell anybody that asks me for any sort of like financial advice. And he said this too. This has always stuck with me. I share this story quite a bit with people when they're asking about financial stuff. And that is, he said, okay, imagine that you and I are going to run a race. We're going to run a race from Florida to California. Ready, set, go. And he said, you take off running. You're running as fast as you can. You're moving full speed ahead. You're running as hard as you can till I can't even see you anymore. He's like, I haven't even moved yet. He said, after maybe like an hour or so, you're gone. I still win the race. And he said, here's why. Because after you're gone running, he said, I pull out my cell phone and I book a ticket for the next flight from Florida to California. He said, I get an Uber to pick me up. I fly on the flight and I make it 6-7 hours later. He said, I win the race. You're still not out of Florida. You're still running. You're dying. You're losing your breath. And he said, why is that? How is that fair? And he said, because one of the biggest lies that we're told is that if you work hard, you will have success. And he said, are you a hard worker? And I was like, yes. And he was like, are you successful the way you want? And I was like, no. He said, you are exhibit A of one of the biggest lies that we are told by society, that working hard is the way to success. He said, one of the biggest things that is way more important is having the right vehicle. He said, I won the race because I had the right vehicle. You were running and I took a jet plane. And he said, when you get yourself into real estate investing, into stock investing, or into a business, that is when you're hopping on the jet plane. These are the vehicles that the wealthy and the affluent use. So I'd say that if you are wanting to prep financially, you need to make sure that you take an objective step back and say, hey, let me evaluate my situation. Am I in the right vehicle? And if so, then great. How do I optimize this? And if I'm not, maybe I need to reassess what I'm doing, because I know what it feels like to be that person that's at the 9-to-5 job all the time, feeling like you're on the rat wheel, getting no traction whatsoever. And it's really hard to think, how am I going to prep for myself and my family when I can barely even pay my bills? So I think it really depends at where you're at in your life. Take a step back and then figure out, okay, am I on the right track? Or if I'm not? Because if I'm not, then maybe I need to change up the plan.
This is beautiful. I love it. So well said, too. I want to know, and then I think we're going to finalize this. My last question, I'm deeply interested in something that is the most important aspect of preparedness of life, and that is our health. There's no financial investments, there's no preparations that you can make that are more important to our health. It's something I'm very passionate about. And I know your content isn't based around health, but you're a human being and you have learned through life. I'm curious, what things have you done to try to improve health? Do you take supplements? What supplements do you recommend? Is there things in your life where you're like, I know I need to do this and I'm trying to get to that point, but just your advice for yourself on what you can improve or what you're taking currently to make sure that your health is priority number one.
Yes. So I'd say that right now I'm going through an existential crisis because I am like approaching 40. And so like I am thinking to myself, like, okay, as I'm getting closer to this, what do you call it? Over the hill, middle age or whatever. You start thinking like, okay, like where am I at in life? And I was thinking like my health is one of the things because hey, I've got 2 kids, I've got a wife, I'm trying to take care of them. I'm doing my business stuff. Sometimes you're under a lot of stress, and am I taking care of myself? Like the last thing I want is to, collapse of a heart attack or something from stress or, whatever. And then also I did those personality tests recently for like my businesses to figure out like, okay, how do I tick and operate better? And one of them said that like I'm a super high. So I did like the DISC, the Enneagram, the 16 personalities, all of these things. And on the DISC, I'm like a very, very high, actually like the highest like D. So it's like very, very like aggressive, goal-oriented like personality, get things done. And they said with that personality, one of the things that helps, alleviate some of the stress and pressure is you have to work out. you have to like do something physical. And I've been wanting to do that anyways, because like my whole thing as I approach 40 is to be like 40 and fabulous. Let me be in the best shape of my life. Let me take care of myself, because sometimes that area can get neglected. So I've been every morning, like I try to wake up at 6, hit the gym before I start my day. I've been trying to eat a whole lot more healthy, and just take care of myself. And I've been feeling a lot better, drinking enough water, supplements. I actually have like a homesteading group that I'm connected to, and they send me supplements that they sell from their garden that they're growing out in the Ozarks. So they're out in the middle of like all the states in some location that nobody knows about. I order from them. And I also, I just have been recently trying to up my protein. So, just trying to prioritize health. My wife and I are both doing this right now, just trying to make sure, like, as we're getting into the 40s, that we are taking care of ourselves, because it hasn't been something that has been my focus, maybe like in the past. And now I'm like, hey, this is to make sure that I last. This is something that I got to prioritize. So, but I'm more of in the research phase and experimental phase, but I've been getting a lot of improvement recently. But yeah, so I've been cranking away on that. And then I also, what else? I think that's it. Working out and trying to eat right.
That's dialing it in. And I guess you mentioned some supplements. Is there not necessarily an endorsement of the particular supplements that you're taking? Is there any supplements that you've learned over the course of your life that you go, I just can't live without it? Two for me. Well, there's a lot for me. I'm going to list some of mine real quick, and then I want to hear if there's anything that stands out to you. But creatine is always at the top of the list. I am a creator of an electrolyte blend, so I've got an electrolyte powder that I currently sell. It's high sodium, magnesium, potassium, and vitamin D, K2. That magnesium helps with the synthesis of that vitamin D. There's so many benefits to that. I'm a big believer in collagen and correct protein consumption. I love cayenne pepper. I believe there are benefits to even just utilizing that spiciness. And I've done a bunch of content on cayenne pepper. It's one of my favorites. If I'm feeling sore, I found that baking soda is incredible to break up that lactic acid so I can recover more quickly, along with the creatine. But the creatine actually even gives me more of a mental focus. It's not just for improving my muscle. It is interesting going through all of the variations in my life of different diets that I've done, that I've found that I'm more cognitively prepared for the day. I can have better conversations. I have better workouts when my focus of my diet is on ruminant meats. Personally, that's beef, eggs, beef tallow, and very little else. I do eat a bunch of snacks and treats because we own a cafe and we make a lot of delicious treats and donuts and things. But generally speaking, I make it so that when I go to the grocery store, these are the things that I'm buying, if I even go to the grocery store. It's very rare that we actually go to a grocery store to get our food. But those are some of my suggestions. Supplements, you mentioned that. What are your thoughts on that? What are you taking currently, or that
Yeah.
realized are beneficial?
What's funny is that, so like my wife has been kind of leading the charge on it, and some of the ones you mentioned are some of the ones that she has us do. I'm more so like I take them and she researches them. I'm
Okay.
she's the research person, and I'm more of the like the just do it person.
That's a good
So
partnership.
so she actually is taking collagen right now. She's mentioned it to me. I haven't taken it yet. Also, we have, like, from that homesteading group, it's like a little container with like an eyedropper of cayenne pepper extract. So I like to take that every morning. It's got a nice little kick to it. But all of the lungs type of things, because like I have asthma and like we have trouble breathing sometimes, especially living right in the city. So that labella, mullein, um, and the cayenne, I try to take those every single day. And then let me see here. I try to make sure I keep up on the protein. But right now, I'm more so in the research phase. So I used to take creatine when I was younger. I took it for a little bit when I was working out when I was younger, but I haven't taken it recently. But maybe I should incorporate it, because I've been fairly consistent on the workouts, and I wonder if that would like help me.
Totally.
You mentioned you mentioned a lot of good stuff, and I'm like taking notes in my head. I'm like, oh man, like I need to do that.
Yeah, creatine is so much more than what we used it for as teenage boys. It's so safe. It is I personally can't think of a demographic that wouldn't benefit from creatine supplementation. Now you get creatine, you get B12, you get carnitine, you get all these things from beef, but that supplementation of that regular occurrence of getting the amount of creatine that your body can really benefit from. Another one I didn't mention is Lugol's iodine. I take a little shot in water of iodine every day. A lot of people are deficient in iodine, but interesting stuff. And your journey, I'm super happy that you're saying that, because honestly, none of this really matters if we don't have good health. And that is kind of the keystone, I think, for all of the preparedness. It's maybe more important than anything else is our health and making sure that we're, equipped to actually do things in case there's an emergency. And that I'm talking about lethal tools training. I'm talking about self-defense, home defense. I'm talking about all of the things that kind of constitute your ability to protect your family and all of your investments. So I appreciate this. This was so interesting. I want nothing more than for people to have a true source that they can go to for news. And I am glad that I have found Steve Ram to explain what is going on in what I see as an unbiased method to go, these are the facts. This is what I am seeing. Here's some receipts. You make a decision for yourself. We are people like us that are creating content online. We are the new media. And this is the new realm. I know you grab a lot of clips from, legacy media sources to validate what you're saying and to have them explain elements, but your insight into the news is valuable. I hope you keep rolling strong with what you're doing. How can people find you?
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, they could find me I'm on YouTube, Rumble, or Spotify as Steve Ram. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, and True Social as Steve Ram 3. And then I've got a Facebook page, and I'm on X as Steve Ram News. So they can
This will
find me
all
any
be
of
in the
those.
show notes. I'll have links to all of this. And again, Steve, thank you so much for your time. I hope we can do this again.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.